9 hikers walked into a Russian mountain in February 1959. None of them came back. That part most people know. Here's what they don't know. When rescuers found the camp, the tent had been cut open from the inside. Their boots were still there, their warm clothes, their food, all of it left behind. They ran into minus 40 degrees, barefoot, and the footprints in the snow, calm and measured, like 9 people, just going for a walk. The bodies came later, and the injuries on some of them were so catastrophic, Soviet forensic experts said the force was comparable to a car crash. No car, no explosion, no avalanche debris. The government closed the case and gave it a name: death by an unknown compelling force. 6 words, no explanation. Files sealed for 30 years. This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, and after 65 years, nobody has a clean answer. Welcome to the Panks universe, where we explore the unknown, the unexplained, and the mysteries that challenge reality. Before any of this makes sense, you need to know who these people were, because this story only works, the horror of it only lands, when you understand that these weren't tourists. These weren't beginners who wandered somewhere dangerous by accident. These were exactly the kind of people who should have survived. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, a man who had led winter expeditions before and come back every time. His 8 teammates were students and graduates from the same university. Most had years of winter hiking experience. The route they had planned, a Category 3 traverse through the northern Urals, was the hardest classification in Soviet mountaineering. They had trained for this. They had packed for this. They knew exactly what the cold up there could do. 10 people started the journey. One turned back on January 28th, a student named Yuri Yudin, whose knee gave out at an abandoned logging settlement deep in the forest. He said goodbye to his friends, handed over some gear, and walked back down. He was 21 years old. He had no idea he would never see any of them again. Yudin lived until 2013. He spent 54 years looking for an answer. He carried a small toy that Lyudmila Dubinina, one of the 9, had given him as a parting gift. He kept it until the day he died. He never found out what happened to her. The remaining 9 pushed on. The last confirmed photographs of them alive were taken on February 1st, 1959, making their way up the slope of a mountain the local Mansi people had named centuries before any of this happened. Kolachyako. In the Mansi language, that means dead mountain. When the group missed their scheduled check-in telegram, a search party was dispatched. They reached the last campsite on February 26th, nearly 4 weeks after those final photographs. What they found would take investigators decades to stop arguing about, because the camp hadn't been destroyed. No sign of an attack, no avalanche path, no chaos. Just a tent on a snow slope, and everything wrong about it. The tent had been sliced open from the inside. Multiple cuts, deliberate. Like whoever was inside needed out so urgently they couldn't crawl to the entrance. Inside, boots lined up neatly, warm coats, food, a fully working stove. Everything that 9 experienced winter hikers would need to survive a night at altitude in minus 40 degrees. All of it left behind. Near the tent entrance, investigators found something that stopped them cold. A handwritten newspaper. The group had called it Evening Otorten, a joke paper written the night before. Someone had been in a good enough mood to write satire. Then something happened. 9 sets of footprints led away from the tent, down the slope, toward a tree line about a kilometer away. Investigators studied every print carefully. None of them showed panic. None of them showed running. Every single print was consistent with 9 people, walking at a normal pace. 9 people who knew exactly what minus 40 degrees could do to a barefoot human body, walked into it anyway. The footprints reached the tree line and disappeared under snow. The search party split up, and over the next several weeks, the bodies began to surface. So, if you found this and haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because what the search party found in that tree line is where this story stops being strange and starts being something else entirely. The first 5 were found within days, scattered across the open slope between the tent and the tree line. Cause of death for all 5 was the same: hypothermia. Tragic, brutal, but explainable. Except nothing else about where they were or how they were found made any sense at all. 2 of them, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, were lying near the remains of a small fire at the base of a large cedar tree. Both were in their underwear. Krivonishenko had burns on his hands, and a small piece of flesh clenched between his teeth, bitten from his own hand. The cedar above them had branches broken off up to 5 meters high. Someone had climbed it. In the dark, in the cold, searching for something above the tree line or trying to get away from something on the ground. Igor Dyatlov was found 300 meters back toward the tent, arms raised, frozen that way, like he had been crawling back when he died. 2 others, Zenaida Kolmogorova and Rustem Slobodin, were found in almost identical positions, each one closer to the tent than the last. They had turned back, all 3 of them, decided to go back for the tent and never made it. Then the snow melted in May. 4 more bodies were recovered from a ravine, buried under 4 meters of ice. And that's where the case broke open. Lyudmila Dubanina had fractured ribs on both sides. Semyon Zolotaryov had fractured ribs on both sides. Nikolai Thibault Brignol had a catastrophically fractured skull. The trauma was internal. No cuts, no bruising on the skin, no external wounds of any kind. Soviet forensic experts, when pressed on what kind of force could cause injuries like these without leaving a mark on the outside, said it was comparable to a high-speed vehicle impact. No vehicle had been anywhere near this mountain. The 4 in the ravine had one more detail. The clothing on some of them had been cut from the first bodies found near the cedar tree. Someone had stripped pieces from the dead and used them to cover the living. They were organized, right up until the end, still trying to keep each other alive. Dubanina was missing her tongue. 2 of the others were missing their eyes. And when the clothing was tested, the Geiger counter went off. Every member of the Dyatlov group has been studied, written about, theorized over. But one of them doesn't fit. One of them had a story that nobody has been able to fully explain. And the more you look at him, the more the entire case shifts. His name was Semyon Zolotaryov, 37 years old, 15 years older than most of the group, a World War II combat veteran, a ski instructor working toward an advanced certification. He joined the expedition at the very last minute, replacing another hiker who had dropped out. Nobody in the core group knew him well. He had his own equipment, his own habits. He kept slightly apart. He was also carrying an unusual amount of photographic equipment for a physically demanding winter trek. 2 cameras, one found in the tent, a second strapped around his neck when his body was recovered from the ravine months later. That second camera, and whatever film was inside it, has never been publicly accounted for. Researcher Alexei Rakitin spent years on this case and proposed something that intelligence historians haven't been able to fully dismiss. Zolotaryov, he argued, was working for Soviet intelligence. Krivonishenko, WHO had worked at the Chelyabinsk 40 nuclear facility, was also involved. The expedition was cover for a dead drop operation, delivering radioactive material samples to foreign contacts under the guise of a hiking trip. It would explain the radiation on the clothing. It would explain the cameras. It would explain why a man 15 years older than the rest of the group joined at the last minute with no prior connection to them. And then there's the detail that stops everyone cold. When Zolotaryov's body was recovered from the ravine, he was holding a pen in one hand and a small notepad in the other. A colonel on the scene picked up the notepad, looked at it, cursed. He's written nothing. Zolotaryov, in his final minutes, in the dark, in the cold, under 4 meters of snow, had been trying to write something down. Whatever it was, he ran out of time. Nobody has confirmed the intelligence theory. No declassified document places a KGB operation at Koletsk on that night, but nobody has disproven it either. Zolotaryov's grave was exhumed in 2018 for DNA testing. The results confirmed his identity. They answered nothing else. He remains the most unexplained person in an inexplicable already story. A criminal investigation was opened. The Soviet state had 9 dead citizens, a destroyed camp, and injuries that no one could explain. What they produced was worse than nothing, because the official conclusion didn't close the case. It buried it. The lead investigator was a man named Lev Ivanov. He had the files, forensic reports, witness testimonies from other expedition teams in the region. The case was formally closed in May 1959, less than 4 months after the bodies started appearing. The conclusion: death by an unknown compelling natural force. No charges, no suspects, no mechanism. The files were classified and locked away. Then, in 1990, as the Soviet Union began to come apart, the records were unsealed, and Lev Ivanov gave an interview. He said his team had been ordered to suppress certain findings, specifically reports from multiple other hiking groups operating in the Ural region that same February, who had seen glowing spheres moving through the sky in the direction of the Dyatlov group's camp. One group, camped 50 kilometers away on the same night, reported a circular luminous object described as the size of a full moon, descending toward Koletsk. The sky remained illuminated for several minutes after it went down. Ivanov said he had been told to drop it. He said, in his own words, that the role of these objects in the tragedy had seemed obvious to him at the time. He published that account in 1990. He died the same year. Whether he was describing genuine unexplained phenomena, classified military activity, or something he had convinced himself of after 30 years of carrying an unsolved case, nobody knows. What is known is that someone told him to stop looking, and he did, for 30 years. Every serious researcher who has spent time on Dyatlov Pass has eventually arrived at the same wall. You can explain some of it. Any theory can account for part of the evidence. None of them account for all of it. And that gap, that space between what each theory explains and what it leaves behind, is where this case has lived for 65 years. The slab avalanche. The Russian government endorsed this officially in 2020. A team of Swiss physicists published a peer-reviewed model in 2021, showing that a small delayed slab, triggered by the coatee the hikers made in the slope to pitch their tent, combined with strong katabatic winds, could generate enough force to produce the internal injuries without external wounds. The most scientifically rigorous explanation anyone has produced. It doesn't explain the calm footprints. It doesn't explain why the tent's ski poles were still standing upright in the snow. It doesn't explain why 9 people with avalanche training spread out in different directions, rather than staying together and digging in. Infrasound. The local topography may have created low-frequency sound waves below the range of human hearing, generated by wind moving across the mountain's ridgeline. At certain frequencies, infrasound causes irrational panic, disorientation, and a sensation of overwhelming dread the body can't locate or explain. It would account for the flight from the tent, the calm footprints, the barefoot escape into the cold. It doesn't explain the internal injuries. Military testing. The glowing orbs, the classified files, the radiation. The fact that the Ural Mountains were an active Soviet weapons development zone in 1959. A pressure wave event from an experimental detonation could produce compression injuries without external wounds. It would explain why the investigation was shut down so fast. There is no physical evidence placing any test at that location on that night. Every theory answers one room in this house. Every theory leaves a door locked. Most mysteries have one question without an answer. This one has 7. I want to end somewhere that the theories don't go. Not the forensics, not the radiation, not the classified files. Something older than all of that. The Mansi people have lived in the northern Urals for centuries. Long before Soviet expeditions. Long before Category 3 ratings and criminal investigations. They had a name for the mountain, Kholat Shako, Dead Mountain, and a name for the peak the group was actually trying to reach, Otorten. In Mansi, the closest translation is "don't go there." They named these places something specific, for reasons that predate 1959 by generations. 9 experienced, trained, prepared people went up that mountain in February 1959. They were calm enough the night before to write a joke newspaper. Skilled enough that their footprints leaving the tent showed no panic, no running, no chaos. Something changed that. Something, in the dark, in the cold, on that slope, overwhelmed 9 people who knew exactly what they were doing. And in 65 years of investigation, theorizing, government inquiry, and forensic reanalysis, nobody has been able to say exactly what. No crash, no clear enemy, no satisfying explanation, just a tent cut open from the inside. 9 sets of footprints, calm in the snow, walking toward a tree line they would never walk back from. And a mountain the Mansi knew enough to name before any of us arrived. Dead Mountain. Maybe they always knew. Subscribe to the Panks universe, where curiosity never ends. See you in the next story.